Abusive mother gave me half her house, then kicked out my pregnant girlfriend and me, so I forced a court sale and she lost double what I gained. People always say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes I think whoever came up with that saying never met my mother. Hi everyone, I'm Jake, and today I want to share with you the most insane story about how my toxic, controlling mother thought she could manipulate me one last time, only to end up losing her house and a whole lot more. Trust me, this story has more twists than a soap opera, and by the end, you'll understand why sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone destroy themselves. Let me start from the beginning because you need to understand what kind of person my mother really is. Growing up, my mom wasn't just strict or demanding, she was downright abusive. I'm talking about emotional manipulation, constant put-downs, and this weird obsession with controlling every aspect of my life. She had this way of making me feel like I owed her everything, like I was some kind of burden she had graciously decided to keep around. Classic narcissistic parent behavior, if you know what I mean. When I was a kid, she'd tell me things like, "You're lucky I don't just dump you at an orphanage," or "Nobody else would ever love someone as difficult as you." She had this twisted way of giving me something nice, like a toy or a treat, and then holding it over my head for weeks, reminding me how generous she was and how grateful I should be. It was exhausting, honestly. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield where one wrong word could set off a massive explosion. As I got older, things only got worse. She tried to control who I dated, what career I chose, even what clothes I wore. When I finally moved out at 19, she acted like I was abandoning her, calling me ungrateful and selfish. But here's the thing about toxic parents, they never really let you go. They just find new ways to keep their hooks in you. Fast forward to 3 years ago when I was 26. I had been dating this amazing woman named Sarah for about 2 years, and we were really serious about each other. Sarah was everything my mother wasn't: kind, supportive, and genuinely caring. She never tried to control me or make me feel guilty for having my own thoughts and feelings. Naturally, my mother hated her from the moment they met. My mom would make these passive-aggressive comments whenever Sarah was around. Things like, "Oh, Sarah, that's an interesting outfit choice," or "I'm sure Jake will grow out of this phase eventually." She'd also pull me aside and whisper things like, "Are you sure she's the right kind of girl for you? And I just don't want to see you make a mistake you'll regret." Classic manipulation tactics to try to drive a wedge between us. But Sarah was smart and saw right through it. She never took the bait or got into arguments with my mom. She'd just smile politely and change the subject. This actually seemed to frustrate my mother even more because she couldn't get a reaction out of Sarah. It was like watching a master manipulator meet an immovable object. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. Out of nowhere, my mother calls me up one day and says she wants to have a serious conversation about my future. She invites Sarah and me over for dinner, and I'm immediately suspicious because my mom being nice to Sarah was about as rare as finding a unicorn. But curiosity got the better of me, so we went. During dinner, my mother puts on this whole performance about how she's been thinking about her legacy and what she wants to leave behind. She starts talking about how the family house, this beautiful 3-bedroom property in a really nice neighborhood that she'd owned for 15 years, was too big for just her. Then she drops this bombshell. She wants to put my name on the deed as a co-owner, giving me a 50% stake in the house. I was absolutely stunned. This woman who had spent my entire life making me feel worthless was suddenly offering to give me half of her most valuable asset. Sarah and I exchanged glances because we both knew something was off. My mother doesn't do anything out of the kindness of her heart. There's always an angle, but she had this whole speech prepared about how she wanted to make sure I had security and stability, especially since Sarah and I were getting more serious. She even had the paperwork ready to go, saying her lawyer had already drawn everything up. The house was worth about $400,000 at the time. So we're talking about a $200,000 gift on paper. Sarah whispered to me that maybe we should think about it. But honestly, I was so shocked by this rare display of generosity from my mother that I just went with it. We signed the papers that night, and just like that, I owned half of my childhood home. My mother kept going on about how this proved how much she loved me and how she wanted us to be a real family. For about 6 months, things were actually pretty good. My mom seemed to have turned over a new leaf, being nicer to both Sarah and me. She'd invite us over for dinner regularly, and for the first time in my adult life, I started to think maybe we could have a normal relationship. Sarah was still skeptical, but even she admitted that my mother seemed different. Then Sarah got pregnant, and everything changed overnight. When we told my mother the news, I expected her to be happy. After all, she was going to be a grandmother, and she'd always talked about wanting grandchildren someday. Instead, her face went completely cold, and she just stared at us for what felt like forever. Finally, she said, "Well, I hope you've thought this through because children are expensive and exhausting." That should have been my first red flag. But I was too excited about becoming a father to really process her reaction. Over the next few weeks, though, my mother's true colors started showing again. She'd make comments about how we weren't ready for parenthood, how we should consider other options, and how bringing a child into the world when we weren't married was irresponsible. The worst part was how she started treating Sarah. All that fake niceness disappeared, and she went back to her old passive-aggressive ways, but worse. She'd make jokes about Sarah's morning sickness, saying things like maybe your body is trying to tell you something. She'd criticize everything Sarah ate or did, always under the guise of just trying to help. Sarah was dealing with a really difficult first trimester, and my mother's behavior was making everything worse. I tried talking to my mom about it, but she'd just play innocent and act like she didn't know what I was talking about. "I'm just concerned about the baby," she'd say, or "I'm trying to help Sarah make good choices." Things came to a head about 4 months into Sarah's pregnancy. We had been staying at my apartment most of the time, but one weekend we decided to spend a few days at the house since I was technically half owner. My mother had seemed okay with it when I asked, so I thought maybe she was coming around. Big mistake. We arrived on Friday evening and everything seemed normal. My mom made dinner, we watched a movie, and it felt like the good old days when she was pretending to be supportive. But Saturday morning, I woke up to find my mother screaming at Sarah in the kitchen, apparently. Sarah had gotten up early and made herself some toast and tea for her morning sickness, and my mother was furious about it. She was yelling about how Sarah was making herself too comfortable and acting like she owned the place. When I tried to defend Sarah, my mother turned on me too, saying I was choosing some girl over my own mother. The argument escalated quickly, with my mother bringing up every grudge she'd ever held against me and Sarah. She said we were ungrateful, that we were taking advantage of her generosity, and that she was tired of us freeloading in her house. When I reminded her that I owned half the house, she got even more furious and told us to get out immediately. We packed our things and left that day, but I thought maybe she'd cool off and we could work things out. After all, I was still half owner of the property, and she couldn't just kick me out permanently, right? Wrong. The next week, I tried calling my mother to talk things through, but she wouldn't answer her phone. So I decided to just go over to the house to have a face-to-face conversation. That's when I discovered she had changed all the locks. I stood there on the front porch, key in hand, unable to get into the house I legally half-owned. When I knocked on the door, my mother opened it just a crack with the chain lock still attached and told me I was no longer welcome. She said that just because my name was on the deed didn't mean I could disrespect her in her own home. I was absolutely floored. This woman had given me half ownership of her house, then kicked me out and changed the locks when I tried to stand up for my pregnant girlfriend. It was like the ultimate power play. She wanted all the control without any of the legal consequences. That's when I knew I had to take legal action. I contacted a lawyer that same week and explained the situation. He told me that as a co-owner, I had every right to access the property and that my mother couldn't legally exclude me. He said we had several options, but the most effective would be to file for a partition sale, which would force the sale of the house and split the proceeds according to ownership percentages. I'll be honest, the idea of forcing my mother to sell her house felt extreme. Part of me still hoped we could work things out like adults, so I tried one more time to reach out to her, sending a letter explaining that I just wanted to talk and find a solution that worked for everyone. Her response was to have her own lawyer send me a cease and desist letter, threatening to have me arrested for harassment if I came near her property again. She was still referring to it as solely her house, completely ignoring the fact that I was a legal co-owner. That's when I realized my mother hadn't changed at all. The whole generous gift of half the house had been just another manipulation tactic. She probably thought that by making me a co-owner, she could control me even more, making me feel indebted to her while still maintaining all the actual power. When I didn't play along with her games, she tried to just pretend the legal reality didn't exist. So I told my lawyer to move forward with the partition sale. The legal process took about 8 months. And let me tell you, my mother fought it every step of the way. She tried to argue that I had abandoned the property, that the deed transfer wasn't valid, and even that I had somehow coerced her into signing it. None of it held up in court because the paperwork was solid and we had witnesses to the signing during this time. Sarah and I were dealing with all the stress of the pregnancy and legal battle while trying to plan for our baby. Sarah was amazing through the whole thing, never once suggesting that maybe I should just give up and walk away. She understood that this wasn't really about the money. It was about not letting my mother get away with yet another manipulation. The house eventually went on the market, and because of the legal situation and the forced sale circumstances, it didn't get the best price. The real estate market had also softened a bit since the original deed transfer, so instead of the $400,000 it had been worth, we ended up selling for about $360,000 after legal fees and selling costs. I walked away with about $170,000. My mother got the same amount, but here's the kicker. She had to give up the house she'd lived in for 15 years and find somewhere else to live. Meanwhile, I used my portion as a down payment on a beautiful house for Sarah, our baby, and me, but the story doesn't end there. Because my mother's financial situation was apparently much more precarious than any of us realized. It turns out she had been counting on staying in that house rent-free for the rest of her life. She hadn't really planned for having to buy or rent another place at her age. And the housing market had gotten expensive, with only $170,000 and a limited income. She couldn't afford to buy anything comparable in the same area. She ended up having to move to a small apartment in a less desirable part of town. And from what I heard through other family members, she was constantly complaining about how I had stolen her house and ruined her life. The really ironic part is that if she had just been decent to Sarah and me, none of this would have happened. I never wanted to force a sale of the house. I would have been perfectly happy to let her live there for the rest of her life while I maintained my 50% ownership. All she had to do was treat us with basic respect and honor the legal agreement she had initiated, but true to form, she had to try to have her cake and eat it too. She wanted the emotional leverage of having given me something valuable while maintaining complete control over it. When that didn't work out the way she planned, she tried to just pretend the legal reality didn't exist. Our daughter was born 3 months after the house sale was finalized, and she's now 6 months old and absolutely perfect. Sarah and I are engaged and planning our wedding for next spring. We live in a beautiful house that we own outright thanks to the money from the forced sale, and we're building the kind of loving, supportive family that I never had growing up. My mother has tried to reach out a few times, usually through other family members, but it's always the same pattern. She wants me to feel sorry for her and take responsibility for her housing situation. She's never once apologized for kicking out my pregnant girlfriend or changing the locks on a house I legally half-owned. Instead, she maintains that she's the victim in all of this. The last message I got from her, through my aunt, was that she would consider forgiving me if I helped her buy a new house. Can you believe that? She would consider forgiving me, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. It's like she's living in a completely different reality where her actions don't have consequences. I haven't responded to any of her attempts at contact, and I don't plan to. Sarah and I have built a peaceful, happy life without the constant drama and manipulation. Our daughter will grow up knowing she's loved and valued, not used as a pawn in someone else's power games. The craziest part of this whole story is that my mother probably thinks she was the victim of some elaborate scheme. In her mind, I probably planned the whole thing from the beginning, manipulating her into putting my name on the deed just so I could force a sale later. She can't comprehend that her own actions led directly to the outcome she's now complaining about, but that's the thing about narcissistic, manipulative people. They never take responsibility for their choices. It's always someone else's fault, always some external force that caused their problems. They can't see that their own behavior pushes people away and creates the very situations they claim to be victims of. Looking back on everything, I realized that my mother giving me half the house was never really a gift. It was supposed to be another chain, another way to keep me under her control. She probably imagined years of me being grateful and indebted, always having to consider her feelings before making any major life decisions because she held this valuable asset over my head when I didn't play along with that script. When I chose to support my girlfriend and future daughter over appeasing her, she tried to just take it all back. But the law doesn't work that way, and actions have consequences. Even for people who think the rules don't apply to them. The house sale netted me enough money to buy our family home outright. But more importantly, it freed me from the last thread connecting me to my mother's web of manipulation. There's something incredibly liberating about knowing that I don't owe her anything anymore, that there are no more strings she can pull or guilt trips she can use to control my behavior. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about what happened to my mother, and honestly, I don't. She created this entire situation through her own choices. She chose to give me half the house. She chose to kick out my pregnant girlfriend. She chose to change the locks. And she chose to fight the legal consequences instead of trying to work things out reasonably. Every step of the way, she had opportunities to make different choices that would have led to better outcomes for everyone involved. But true to her nature, she chose control and manipulation over relationship and respect. The fact that her tactics backfired so spectacularly is poetic justice, not a tragedy. I hope sharing this story helps other people who are dealing with toxic, manipulative family members realize that you don't have to accept abuse just because someone is related to you. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and your own family is to enforce boundaries, even when it's difficult or expensive. My mother taught me a lot of valuable lessons, just not the ones she intended. She taught me what kind of parent I never want to be, what red flags to watch for in relationships, and how important it is to choose your family wisely, even if that means walking away from the one you were born into. Today, Sarah and I are building the kind of family I always dreamed of having, one based on love, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Our daughter will grow up knowing she's valued for who she is, not what she can do for other people. And if my mother wants to be part of that family someday, she knows what she needs to do to earn that privilege. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not waiting around for an apology that will probably never come. We've moved on, and we're happier than ever. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well,